Okay, everyone, so this is the matchup with Goblins. Goblins is a mono-red deck, mono-red aggro. Most of the deck is creatures, much like the mono-white aggro deck, but there are a lot of burn spells which can finish off for the kill. So this is the opening hand, this is game one. I think it's a pretty strong matchup. It seems this deck does pretty well against any mono-colored, especially mono-colored aggro deck. We got a lot of answers for them in Nausea, we got Echoing Decays, and a lot of Goblins is putting out a lot of the same creature, fast, etc., etc. The only thing we're missing here is white mana. We have the Missionary. If we can get a white mana to get in that in play, we're in even better shape. The Goblins deck also, like the white aggro deck, does not have really a draw engine, so once they empty their hand, they're pretty much done for. Another thing to note is that in game one, if they are not playing cards from their hand, those cards are either going to be land or burn spells, so just keep an eye out on that. They will play creatures at every opportunity. Any Goblins player will tell you that they want to have creatures out at every possible moment. So now I'm sitting here with a lot of options. I have Echoing Decay, I can try and kill something. You also have to watch out for the Mogg Raider. It is the same card basically as the Goblin Sledder, and it allows you to sacrifice a Goblin creature to give another one +1/+1. That is a great way to get around Echoing Decay. I mentioned this a couple times, but if you target one creature and then it gets sacrificed, it will cancel out the Echoing Decay and not kill anything. So you want to be careful on how you work around those and just be aware of their presence at the very least. Another interesting thing is you will see the Mogg conscripts. You got a lot of creatures that cannot attack unless there are others attacking. Not usually a hard thing for this deck. They can draw slow, so that you may have a lot of turns where they are unable to attack with their 2/2 Goblin for one. So we get the Terramorphic here, and I guess I should have... Yeah, I got the planes out of this, so I could get that Missionary and play next turn. I still have the land open for being able to cast the Echoing Decay as soon as possible. And Goblins are going to swing around. Another great thing in this matchup is the Serrated Arrows. It is allowing you to get around the Raiders because the effect of the Sledder and the Raider are until end of turn, and Serrated Arrows and Fume Spitter give you counters, which are always a bonus. Those cannot be cleared really by the mono-red matchup. So you get Chain Lightning. You see, like I was talking about, this deck, the mono-red Goblins deck, has a lot of burn spells in addition to their heavy creature base. Here's another creature you want to look out for is the Sparksmith. It allows you to tap that and do damage to a creature and the opponent himself. I like to kill that one as soon as possible. It can cause big issues later on. Some people may disagree with me on that one in the fact that, if they want to deal damage to themselves, let them. There is something to be said for that. But I have a bias towards the Sparksmith. I like to keep most of my bodies are bigger than theirs or have that 3 toughness. So if I get a Rift Watcher or a Core Fisher in play, I can kill while blocking and not taking damage or losing the creature. So I always go for the Sparksmith because that will allow him to just get that creature advantage on you, and I like to keep that under control as best as possible. So we have Mystical Teachings here. That is a decent card. You can search up the kill spells you need, find yourself a nice Echoing Decay or a Nausea, etc. I do believe I sided it out in this game, just because there's so much on the sideboard that I wanted to bring in that I really needed to fill those holes as soon as possible. And while Teachings is good to search something out, with having the heavy, kill spells and counters, etc., etc., you're willing to draw into those more, and you don't have to search them out as much. So, sideboarding options for the Goblins. There's a lot of stuff we can bring in here. The first thing of course I'm going to bring in is Prismatic Strands and the Hydroblasts. These are great cards to have for this matchup. If anyone has watched all of my other videos, you've heard my going on and on about how awesome I like Prismatic Strands. It's really great that this deck allows you the opportunity to run that alongside Hydroblast. The other thing you're going to bring in is the Crypt Rats. It's a great card to have. It allows you to wipe all of their goblins. Goblins deck does like to bring those out, in swarm, so having the ability to wipe the board, having a creature that can do that is great. The more options to kill stuff, the better. Another thing I will bring in is Doomblades. Doomblades are kind of nice over Edict. I have the one here I will take out. It allows you to target down. Some of their creatures are 2/2, and they will die to Echoing Decay, but you do get the occasional 3/3 that is troublesome. So, I like to bring in at least one of those. It's good to keep the Fume Spitters. I will occasionally side one of those out in other matchups, but I keep all three in. The Serrated Arrows are great for this matchup. I'll usually take out, I think I took out the Grim Harvest, and I told you I took out the Mystical Teachings, so it can get a little tricky. You can also work in the Edicts if you want, but those are just going to end up being sacrifices for token creatures or something like that. So this was my hand in Game 2. I got some great stuff here as far as what I sideboarded. You can see I have both Hydroblast and a Strand. I have the Rift Watcher, and I have an early Echoing Decay. So this is a pretty nice hand, but the only trick to it is I need to draw into white mana, and I need to draw into blue mana. So if I don't do that really fast, then I'm going to be out of luck. My opponent's going to get his typical turn 1. This is another one of those goblins that cannot attack unless he catches a creature spell, but it's very doable. So you're going to, of course, start off with the Bog. It's a tapped land. You don't have a turn 1 play anyways. And we're going to hope that we can get another land, which we don't. This is, again, you're going to run into problems with the Sledders. You got to just be aware of these and the fact that they allow him to sacrifice a creature to pump it up. I'm stumbling over my words here. So he casts this out. I'm going to throw out Echoing Decay, and there's no point in tagging the Marshal with it because he'll just let it die and make the Goblin creature. So what I want to do is use the Echoing Decay on the Cohort so that the Cohort will either be killed or he will be forced to sacrifice the Sledder. If you wait until the Marshal comes into play and too far late, he could have that extra token on the field, and then he's just going to sacrifice that. But by targeting this Cohort, I force him to sacrifice the Sledder, and he's only going to be able to hit me for 1 on this turn. I finally drew the Island, so that allows me to play this Oracle. And you're always going to play the Oracle over the Drifter. Some other matchups like Control, etc., if they're on this turn, you would evoke the Drifter to get the card draw. Here the better play is to put out the Oracle so that you have a blocker. Sorry, I kind of went through that fast, but the other choice there was a Skyfisher. I went with while the Skyfisher is nice, the blocker there, I went with the Deep Analysis because I was a little concerned that I was not going to draw into my white mana, and when I do get that white mana, I'm going to want to use it for these spells instead, so I figured I would grab the Deep Analysis just on the off chance that I don't get that white mana. I'll still have a play later on. Another thing, mostly Goblin decks, when they come up to the Echo on the Marshal, they will not pay it. They will take the sacrifice to leave their mana open. They're usually running very low on mana, so they want everyone they can. This is another thing. The Lightning Bolt came down on my Oracle. You will see a lot of burn spells in this deck, but he was unable to cast a second creature, so his Cohort had to stay at home. I do draw a mana. It's untapped, and I can play Deep Analysis, but I am still a little screwed because I'm trying to find that white mana, which I will not get from this draw because he did sideboard in Pyroblast. It's going to be a tough sell for most of my deck. However, a lot of my creature kill and whatnot will be in black, so it will not be such a bad thing to run into the Pyroblasts here and there. So he plays another War Marshal, and now I'm starting to reach that point where you're overwhelmed. I'm open for a land so I can play Muldrifter. That would be my play if I had drawn a land there. It gives me a blocking body, it gives me cards, and I'm still at a point where I can take some damage from him. I draw Echoing Decay, and this is a nice one as well. I'm going to pass my turn, and what you want to do is, like I said, most of the time the War Marshals will get sacrificed so that they just get the token and have that extra body in play. It leaves their mana open for them to make plays as well. Here he only has 1 card in hand. I'm guessing it's a burn spell because he's been holding on 2 cards. So he actually decides to pay the casting cost for the Echo, which is a little disappointing because if he hadn't, Echoing Decay would have come down and wiped out all 4 of these Goblins. Because he decided to pay that, I did not get as much of an advantage, and I'm only going to be able to wipe out 3 tokens. That's alright, he still was unable to cast a creature, another reason why you see the 2 cards in hand. He didn't drop a land, and he didn't cast a creature, so you know those 2 spells there are burn spells. It's good to be familiar with these decks. Now this may have been a wrong move on my part. I decided to, in an effort to find that white mana, flashback deep analysis. Now I'm at a point in time at this stage of the game where I feel that if I get a white land off this deep analysis play, then I'm going to have the mana open, I can still have Prismatic Strands, I can put out the Rift Watcher, and I'm fine. If I do not get that, as you see here, now I'm screwed. He's going to swing in next turn if he plays a creature for 3. I really can't play Snuff Out without dropping to 4. And that's a hell of a gamble. Because I do not have the white land and I'm sitting on all these blue creatures that I cannot cast, I probably at some point could leave openings for the Hydroblast to come into play, but I decided to discard the Teachings. I didn't think I had time enough to use Teachings to find an answer. This may have been a mistake on my part, but I figured I'm still on the high hopes of getting a white. I finally do, but it is a tapped white. So I'm going to actually hardcast the Snuff Out and kill off the 2/2 Goblin and bounce a land, and I think I'm fine. Though, I'm a little worried. Again, he has 2 cards in hand that he has not been casting, so if those 2 are Lightning Bolts or something with 3 damage, when he attacks with this Martial on next turn, it is game over. Like I said, it seemed like a great start to this hand. I had 3 cards that I sideboarded in, but unfortunately I did not get that white mana to actually get this game going in my favor. As you see, Chain Lightning comes down, and he follows it up with Fire Blast to finish off the game. So he's going to be able to finish me off, and had I gotten that white mana earlier, this would have been a totally different game. I would have had this easily dominated because of these cards in hand, but that's alright, we'll take it to game 3. So this is game 3 with the Goblins, and again, a really nice hand. I didn't make any changes from sideboarding after game 1. I do start out with the Hydroblast, I have Prismatic Strands, I have white mana this time. 2 Fume Spitters is fantastic. Terramorphics to search out the missing colors. I'm sitting pretty good. Now, here I made a play that afterwards I realized I did not think was such a good one. My initial instinct was to grab the island because I already had a black and white land producer. What I really probably should have done, because I did have the second Terramorphic in hand, was to use that first one to grab a swamp, so that on my next turn I could tap that land, play the Fume Spitter, and then return the swamp to hand with the Basilica. On turn 3 I then would have been able to use Terramorphic to search out a blue if I needed it. Now this is another unusual situation you come into, is I'm facing Goblins and they did not have a turn 1 play. That's very unusual for Goblins, having so many 1-cost creatures. The only thing I can imagine is that he chose to sideboard some of those out of there. But I do put the Basilica in play, and we'll have to wait for the Fume Spitters. That mistake with not getting a swamp in the first turn is not so bad because of the fact that he missed his turn 1 drop. But he does get the Flunkies into play, and I was talking about the 3 toughness creature. This is it, but it cannot attack or block alone. There has to be others on the field. So now I can... I leave the Hydroblast open so I can kill it with the island. And then I play the Lone Missionary. I could have also decided to wait on that one in hopes that he again would miss a creature drop and play Terramorphic, but I assumed if he had the Flunkies in hand and he was waiting till turn 2 that he had a turn 1 like the Raider in hand and didn't want to play it so that he could combo off with the Flunkies or something. I could be wrong with that, but again, I'm facing a Raider, so it's going to be a bit troublesome. I do have the Fume Spitter, so I can get that out of there as soon as possible. And he also comes down with the Sparksmith. Like I said again, some people may think I'm overestimating this, but in this deck I think it's important to get rid of this as soon as possible. So now I'm sitting with the option to play a Fume Spitter on this turn. I think the better play, of course, would be to drop the Serrated Arrows so that you can repeatedly kill you can use it to repeatedly kill these creatures in front of you. It's a little slower, but it's gonna be the most effective use of your mana, I believe. So I'm sitting with options. I will kill the Raider, and I can play the Terramorphic so that I have my 5th land for my next turn for the Muldrifter. And I do tap that and play the 1 Fume Spitter, just so he knows where he's sitting in this game. And it's honestly not very good. He's sitting at 4 cards in hand. He's missed a couple creature drops, and I'm sitting with the Fume Spitters. I got another counter on the arrows. I have the strands in hand and card draw coming. I'm sitting pretty good at this point in time. So we swing for 1, get the first damage of the game to my opponent, and I am able to use the Muldrifter and play my Aqueduct. Things are even better now. I got the Evolving Wilds. I can thin more land out of my deck. I have Deep Analysis, and I'm sitting over 20 life, so I can use it twice without having to worry too much. Sometimes you do have to worry about that in the game when you come across mono red and all their burn spells and their fast damage, is that you reach a point where you are too low to use things like Snuff Out and Deep Analysis. You can, on occasion, decide to sideboard out Snuff Out. It will be kind of tricky depending, like I said, if they get a good start, you could be too low to use it for the 4 life, and it's a bit too heavy to use for the 4 casting cost itself. You could always bring in Doomblades to replace it. So my opponent here, he's sitting at 5 mana, which is a lot of mana for Goblins. He's got 4 cards in hands. He's missed several creature drops. I imagine that there's maybe a land or 2 still in there. He clearly had no answer. He wouldn't have conceded this early with 19 life. I mean, he couldn't see my hands, but I will tell you that I was sitting in the advantage in this game currently. The only thing, like I said, I can imagine is that he was sitting on a handful of lands. But yeah, so that's the matchup. You want to be sure to keep as much creature damage in as possible. This deck works really well in this matchup because you have so much life gain and creature control that you're able to stem the tide, basically, and reduce the amount of damage that they can put out. And the whole point of the Goblins deck is to put out a lot of damage fast, so if you can slow that down, then you can swing in for the win.